Welcome to Gamecock Pod Live.
For the next 3 to 4 years, I'll be committed to the University of
This is Rodgers again to the 25, 20, 15, 10. Rodgers scores! Jackie Bradley Jr. delivers for the Gamecocks. Lost it up, looking for Kelly. Touchdown! Can you believe it?
And South Carolina is sending shockwaves through the SEC.
Frederick plays it in at the buzzer. That's a win! Unbelievable! I don't believe it!
And now, live from Studio 54 of the Gamecock Pod Studios, here's the Cockfather himself, Keith Alsep.
All right, happy Thanksgiving, everybody, and welcome into Gamecock Pod Live for November 26th, show 1897 as we approach 1900 episodes. We've got a great show for you today. In just a minute, we will be joined by my good friend, Ben Breiner. We used to call him Ben Prime because he was the first Ben at Go Gamecocks and the state. Now doing special work for thebigspur.com, breaking it down like nobody else. But first, let me tell you about my good friend Chris Payne, the owner-operator of Nana's Porch, the award-winning full-service catering company servicing the greater Charlotte area. Nana's Porch should be your go-to for all your catering needs, whether it's a banquet, a wedding, a corporate event, a birthday, graduation, or engagement celebration, whatever the catering event that you may have coming up. Nana's Porch has got you covered. So go to the homepage, nanasporch.com. That's NANASPORCH.com. Get in touch with Chris Payne. Tell him the good folks at Gamecock Pod Live sent you. You'll love it. I guarantee it. And even if you don't have a catering event coming up, you can still support this Gamecock-owned and operated business by going to the homepage, looking up at the top, and you can order plenty of Nana's Porch award-winning pimento cheese. They ship it right to your front door. Both great flavors, smoky jalapeno and the regular flavor, are available. Affordably priced. Checkout is simple, safe, and secure. Go ahead and order. You probably won't get it in time for this weekend's slate of college football, but you can certainly have it for next weekend when you have the conference championship games. All right, just a couple of news and notes before we get to Ben, who is hanging out in the green room with J-Lo and Paula Abdul. South Carolina women's basketball in action today in the city that never sleeps. No, it's not New York. It's Sin City. It's Las Vegas. They will take on Duke this afternoon at 4:30 p.m. Eastern, or 30 minutes after the conclusion of the first game of the Players Era Championship between number 3 UCLA and number 4 Texas. The game will be at Michelob Ultra Arena. You can check it out on True TV. Tomorrow, South Carolina. If they win, they'll play the winner of UCLA and Texas. If they lose, they'll play the loser of that game. I would expect South Carolina personally to beat Duke today. I don't know how many points they're favored by, but Carol Ross's team has not played up to her standards. I'm sure they'll give South Carolina their best shot because everybody does, because it's a standard. South Carolina's current streak of 121 consecutive weeks in the AP Top 10 poll is currently the longest streak in the country. That's right, UConn, Gino. You dropped out. Dawn Staley's team has not. They are currently rated number 2 in the country. And I don't know why they're not playing the first game. They're the highest rated team in the event. Maybe because it's on the West Coast and you'd be playing at 11 o'clock in the morning. Maybe that's why. Could be a law. I don't know. Those Thursday games will be at 8 or 10:30. I'm sure the losers game will be at 8, followed by the winners bracket game at 10:30. If you're not in a turkey coma, maybe you'll be able to stay up and wait for that. All right, as we all know, Saturday is the 122nd meeting between South Carolina and Clemson. That game will kick off at noon. It will be on the SEC network with Taylor Zarzour and Matt Stinchcomb. Gamecock Alyssa Lang will be on the sideline for that one. We don't care who's calling. Gamecock assistant coach Joe D. Camillus has been nominated for the 30th Broyles Award, which annually honors college football's top assistant coach. There are currently 63 nominees in this year's class, selected from approximately 1,500 nominees across 131 FBS programs. So congratulations to him. Gamecock women's basketball player Tania Latson was named one of the U.S. Basketball Writers Association National Players of the Week. In 2 games last week, Latson averaged 24 points. She shot 77.3% from the field, averaged 4.5 assists per game as well. And so congratulations to Tania Latson. All right, let's go out to California. I would play a little Tupac for you, but YouTube would probably take us down since that would be patent right infringement. One last news note. Just later this week, the SEC will decide whether or not to keep their scholarship limit at 85 or potentially go to 105. I think this would set a very dangerous precedent. I don't care what other conferences are doing. If you are not one of the top 3 or 4 or 5 programs in the SEC, you don't want those other teams to have 20 more scholarships, because they'll just hoard all the players that could be starting for you. They may not even be dressed out for them. And with that, we say happy Thanksgiving to my good friend Ben Breiner, great friend of the show all the way back to 2019. And Ben, I'll never forget, I'd come home to go to a game and was recording with Eric Kimry at whatever the name of that bar and grill was right by the stadium and the state offices. My good friend Brad Loing was there.
Hmm.
And you just hit me on the shoulder and completely surprised me to say hello. And I've never forgotten that. So happy Thanksgiving, my friend. How are you?
Happy Thanksgiving, sir. It's River Rat. That was the brewery. God, I almost forgot that. Oh, I'm fine. It's out west enjoying some cool crisp air, seeing friends, seeing family, getting ready to eat myself into a coma, trying to figure out how many sporting events I can watch or get to while I'm out here. I already caught a Niners Panthers game, so that was interesting.
That was. And, quick thought here. Nobody thought Rico Dowdle would ever be an NFL running back. And he has just become a stud with the Cowboys, now with the Panthers. And I heard Colin Cowherd going off on his national show on Fox about the Panthers head coach not giving the ball to Rico Dowdle when he got 6 touches, and Christian McCaffrey, they were giving him the ball all the time. I mean, what about the rise of Rico Dowdle?
It's been crazy, and it's funny because you look back and whatever roles he had at South Carolina, the problem was never that the offense didn't feature him enough. It was that he was often hurt, and then they ended up having a bunch of running backs, and it wasn't like you were like, well, you can only put the workload on him because, again, he kept breaking down. But yeah, I mean, I remember watching him all the way back in that freshman year and thinking, this kid's pretty good. And it just feels like every space he's gone, you have those moments when you're like, yeah, that kid's pretty good. Though, honestly, the Niners need to stop giving McCaffrey the ball so much. It's too much. They don't need to do that, and yet they keep doing it. I was sitting with friends in the, basically in the sky, and watching him take the handoffs for the game closing drive, just running out the clock. And it's like they have another professional running back. And also, it's not like Christian McCaffrey is aces with ball security. He fumbled it at least once earlier in the game. I don't know. You know what? Kyle Shanahan gets paid a lot more money than I do to make decisions that I don't agree with, and that's how the world works.
I mean, look, let's just face it. Football coaches are not that smart. They've all been hit in the head too many times, and they've been out in the hot sun for too long. And I have a lot of thoughts on that. I do respect Kyle Shanahan, but didn't they have a 3-touchdown lead? Was it 27-6 or 21-6 or 7 or something like that? Why not put in another guy? Why waste your franchise player? I mean, honestly, I didn't even agree with Shane Beamer's decision to play Lenora Sellers in the third quarter against Coastal Carolina. But then again, I hadn't really agreed with a lot of Shane Beamer's decisions, and I don't make $8.3 million a year. But I shouldn't be smarter than him. But on a lot of things, I am smarter than him, and so are a lot of other people that he thinks are morons. So I just wanted to go ahead and get that out of the way. All right, so before we dive into Thanksgiving, and I'm pretty sure I asked you this last year, what's your favorite side for your Thanksgiving Day meal?
It's stuffing. It's absolutely stuffing. Stuffing is the goat of sides. When I go to a restaurant that has a meal that has stuffing as a side, as an option, my face lights up. I'm full of joy. I'll share this story. The first Thanksgiving I spent in Columbia, I'd been working at the state for 2 months. I didn't really know anyone that well, so no one took pity on me and invited me to anything. So I opened up we had a list of restaurants open on Thanksgiving, and I went down to yesterday's, and I sat down and I ordered myself some turkey, and they were like, "What sides do you want?" And I was looking at the sides, and I said, "Can I just get both sides of stuffing?" And they were like, "Yeah, that works." R.I.P. Yesterday's. What a place. What a time.
Yesterday's. That was criminal that place closed down. I've had so many legendary times there and stories I can and cannot tell, but what a great place. Oh, I miss that place. All right, so I'm going to give you grace on that since you're not a Southerner, but for Southerners, the only correct answer is macaroni and cheese.
I grew up in a house. I don't think ever ate macaroni and cheese. That was just not part of our thing. And I had friends who would talk about how much they like Kraft, and I was like, But as
That's
an
not
adopted
really
Southerner,
macaroni and cheese. That's like,
it's good stuff.
I'm making a 3-cheese macaroni and cheese for Thanksgiving. And you bake it in the oven. You don't, put it in the microwave and stir it up. So, all right, favorite dessert for Thanksgiving.
I'm a big apple pie guy, just kind of basic. Of the pies, I think that's the one I would go with. Though I'm always open and welcome to when people want to, throw change ups. I'm sure some people do those little peanut butter cookies with the Hershey's Kiss in the middle for Thanksgiving. I'd have one of those. That sounds great. But if you're talking the standards, probably that. Though I'd be open if someone else wanted to bring, not a big pecan pie person, not a big pumpkin pie person, but if someone wanted to bring any other different pies to the table, I'd probably eat those too.
All right, so shameless plug here. I mean, not even shameless because it's not about me. So if you ever visit Central Texas and maybe you're driving from Austin to College Station or Houston or whatever, there's this town that's about an hour from Austin, right off Highway 71 called Bastrop. They have a historic downtown. It's very picturesque. It looks like something out of I don't know. Is it Frank Coppola? Is that the guy? I mean, anyway, there's a cafe there, Maxine's Cafe and Bakery, right in the heart of historic downtown Bastrop. It's a meat and three place. There's just too much cholesterol with the country fried steak and gravy and all of that, but they have a bakery and phenomenal pies, cakes. They make whole ones you put in your order for Thanksgiving. They do make the best pecan pie I've ever had, and it tastes exactly like my grandmother's pecan pie. Because the first time I ever tried it, I was skeptical because, particularly store-bought pecan pies, that's completely off the table. But when my taste buds were heightened by the taste, it was like I was immediately transported back to my grandmother's kitchen, the linoleum floor, the little table, and the tin that she made her pecan pies in. And it's phenomenal. So I have a whole one of those I drove to Bastrop to pick up yesterday. And essentially my lunch was a slice of peanut butter pie that I took and got a Coke Zero when I filled up my car at Buc-ee's and just sat in the car and ate that peanut butter pie, and it was decadent. So if you're ever in Bastrop, it's only breakfast and lunch. They close at 3, Maxine's Cafe and Bakery. All right. So can we just say that this football season from South Carolina, I'm calling it the lost season, because there were such high expectations coming into this season. South Carolina ended last season on the outside looking in of the college football playoff.
Mm-hmm.
They beat a conference champion that wound up in the college football playoff on said team's home field. They were the hottest team in the country. They won 6 straight games, 4 over ranked opponents. Lenora Sellers looked like Superman. Dylan Stewart was a National Freshman of the Year, playing opposite of Kyle Kennard, who won the Nagurski Award as the top defensive player in the country. You had all these other NFL dudes on that defense. I mean, they basically got prison raped against LSU, and Lenoris, if he hadn't have fumbled that ball in the fourth quarter against Alabama, they could have been 11-1.
Mm-hmm.
Dow Loggins leaves for a head coaching job last year, and in a few minutes we're going to talk about, you wrote a special story for the state on 10 names to familiarize yourself with for Shane Beamer's 4th offensive coordinator search. Ben, I think last year, outside of a handful of elite guys at elite programs, Shane Beamer could have hired just about anybody in the country, and they would have crawled over dudes and thrown them off of the road down a cliff to get to Columbia to be able to coach. Lenore Sellers, Michael Smith, who was like a freshman All-American. You had your top 4 offensive tackles back, Nick Harbor. Mike Furry had just signed like a bevy of highly recruited wide receivers. Van Drevis Jacobs was coming back. Jared Brown was coming back. You know, you had Trevon Ball and Marquis Anderson, who were highly recruited guys. I mean, it seemed like the perfect time to go out and make a big-time hire. And this year it's going to be a lot different because you're either going to be 4-8 or 5-7. And instead, this is the analogy I've made, and then I'm going to hand it off to you. You had Superman, okay, because that's the way Lenora Sellers was playing at the end of the year. We can throw on that Clemson tape, and not just the last drive, but on several long runs. Guys turned down contact. They got the hell out of the way because they didn't want to get trucked by the guy from Krypton, Superman. And Shane Beamer could have basically hired almost anybody, and he hired the only guy that was Lex Luthor that could have that just brought in a 2-ton container of kryptonite. And Shane Beamer let him do it. Every single week you saw the confidence go down, the accuracy go down, him being chained to the pocket like Superman, being chained in a room full of kryptonite. How can you explain that?
I mean, I think from an outward perspective, going back to last year, I think there was a certain logic to the hire. It made certain kinds of sense. And especially in terms of familiarity and comfort with Lenora Sellers, it seemed like they theoretically had a good relationship. I don't know. But it was one of those, it strikes me as one of those things, and I'll compare this to, I'm a Wisconsin alum. I've watched a very weird coaching situation with them, and they hired a coach who seemed right, and a bunch of stuff hasn't gone well, and it's sort of not clear if this is like an AD's job to have the feel for what's coming. And I think that's kind of the situation you have, Shane Beamer in, where you're hiring a guy that checks a lot of boxes you theoretically think are good. And it's on sort of the head coach to be able to read some tea leaves a little bit in terms of, what you can get him to do. Because in theory, you tell him, just keep doing the stuff we're doing, keep coaching and developing Lenora Sellers. Like, it's not like Mike Shula had never run an offense before. And then, and I don't know a ton of the details behind the scenes, but Lord, it just went sideways in about 17 different ways. Some tactical, some just development. Part of a quarterback coach's job is to get the quarterback in the right mindset and get them playing well. And Mike Shula did not do that, clearly, like the results we see. I think it would have been interesting in terms of going out for a swing last year, just because I'd be interested what Shane Beamer would have wanted from that. I'd also be interested what Lenora Sellers would have wanted for that, because obviously in this current modern era, you're not exactly held hostage by your player, but like, if there was an offensive vision that Lenora Sellers didn't agree with, Lenora Sellers was in position to potentially go say, who else wants to put an offer in? And that in my mind is always a concern. I don't know the back end about how he's locked in, but it's been a very strange one to watch, because again, like, I don't think Mike Shula at his base is completely unskilled enough to do this, but whatever was happening behind those scenes was not it. And you end up with this season that I still feel is very strange, because if they are 7% better and can flip 1-2 of those other games, you go from playoff contender to 7-5, and that isn't fun. But going from playoff contender to 7-5, like, there's something there, and going from playoff contender to 5-7, there's a lot less there. And yeah, just real messy all around.
I mean, honestly, if South Carolina's even 7-5, I think you still got to fire Mike Shula and Lonnie Teasley. Like,
probably, yeah.
South Carolina, Lonnie Teasley should have been fired after 2023. It was recommended to Shane Beamer that he fire him. He was going to do that. Then he changed his mind. It was recommended last year that they do that, and he paid a price for that. And not many coaches end up firing even one assistant coach during the year. But Shane Beamer's now fired 2 assistant coaches during the year, both on offense, and the 2 guys that were the only 2 guys, except for the Alabama game when the writing was on the wall, that controlled the game plan, that put in the run game, the pass game. And there was even red lights going off at Mike Shula's introductory press conference when he talked about Lenoris needing to stay in the pocket more. And it just seemed like, even though he had just coached Cam Newton and that he had been in Buffalo with this guy named Josh Allen, who makes a lot of chunk plays out of the pocket, just off script plays, just like Lenora Sellers did, he decided, nope, we're running it up the middle every time with Rasul Faison or Oscar Attaway, even though Faison is not a run it up the middle back. We're not playing Jawarn Howell, even though he's the best back on the team. We're not giving it to Matthew Fuller, even though he just outran the entire LSU defense for a touchdown. We're still not going to put him in. We're just going to play these guys. We're going to run it up the middle, and we're going to keep Lenoris in the pocket. And that is coaching malpractice. And what's worse is Shane Beamer said every week at his press conferences, which you were at or you watched on YouTube just like I did, oh, I'm in the offensive meetings, I'm in the quarterback meetings. We go through the play sheet on Friday nights at the hotel. And he did nothing to change that. And so now, if I'm Lenore Sellers, and more importantly, if I'm Lenore Sellers' dad, we better be involved in this coaching search. And if you don't pick the guy we want, we are definitely getting the hell out of town, because we're not letting you screw up another year of my son's career. That would be what I would be thinking if I was Lenore Sellers' dad.
That is probably the case, and I'm going to be interested to see how, once the regular season ends, what kind of things start leaking out, what kind of information we start getting, especially in terms of like different offensive styles, what kind of looks, because there's the names that we're all talking about. And the thing that I'm most interested in is left field names right now. Like the world, I talk.
That's Shane Beamer's specialty, brother, is left field names.
But
like
this,
Marcus Satterfield and even Dow Loggins. Nobody had ever heard of them.
I think what I'm looking for is maybe like the more exciting kind of left field names, like, this guy runs a Division II offense that runs 100 plays a game and, is half triple option. And I'm like, let me learn more about that fella. But that's sort of where my head is at, because I don't know. Maybe he does follow the what the phrase for it, the big name list type stuff. Maybe he does grab one of the names from all of our lists. But maybe there's, some contact in the coaching world that turns him on to something and we get something interesting, or maybe it's another Dow Loggins. I think in an era where the hype around you can tie to that NIL money so much, like, it's harder to make a Dow Loggins move. But Shane Beamer's also made a lot of moves that I've sort of been like, I don't know what the PR of that, but you know what? It's his job to lose or win at this point. So, or lose or hold on to. So I guess he gets to make those choices. But I'll definitely be interested if it comes from that group. And now I'm actually remembering that back in the day when Muschamp hired Bobo, I remember literally sitting in a meeting that I was not supposed to be doing work during and starting to just write an article that's like, is Will Muschamp just going to hire Mike Bobo? Because like everything really makes sense there. So,
I mean, if Shane Beamer would have kept Mike Bobo, I still think Mike Bobo would be dialing up plays, and he would not have let Lonnie Teasley be the offensive line coach and make piss poor evaluations out of the transfer portal, except Torricelli Simpkins. And
I mean,
they would not have wasted the second year of Spencer Rattler, and they would not have wasted this year of Lenore Sellers.
I mean, we'd have a lot
of that guy may not be the greatest offensive coordinator in the world, but he is extremely good at what he does, and he is competent.
Fun fact, I am sitting all of 10 blocks away from the man who hired Mike Bobo away from South Carolina, or at least from his office. And if things break right, I might go watch him coach a football game before Cal tells him to get the hell out. Brian Harsin is the OC here, which is wild. I'm in Berkeley, by the way, for people who don't know that.
No, I know where you are. All right, so South Carolina is now a 3.5 point line favorite. It's moved from 2.5 to 3.5. What are your thoughts on the matchup, Ben? I mean, certainly this is a huge game. And I think, for me, a South Carolina win against Clemson is one of the very few things that could take the bitter taste of basically eating a triple patty turd sandwich, out of the mouths of Gamecock fans, because then Shane Beamer could say, I am the only guy in the history of this program not named Steve Spurrier to beat Clemson 3 out of 4 years.
I think it carries a lot of weight for a specific reason. I've kind of been thinking about the dynamics of how you enjoy college football. And to a degree, you enjoy a season. You enjoy the full product. You enjoy going 9-3. You enjoy the ups and the downs and the moments. And then you get to the end and you say, that was good, that was bad, that was okay, whatever. And when you're having a bad season, you start trying to figure out, are there moments and afternoons you savor? Even if the season was bad, did that season give you a day where you felt fantastic? It's interesting. You look back at like the Georgia win in 2019, like that was a very cool day, but maybe didn't make you feel quite that joyous because it didn't totally feel like it felt like a moment, but it felt like a really weird moment. And then everything went sideways. I not to talk too much about my own life, but I've personally experienced this where my alma mater is not very good this year, but they've had several very cool upsets. And even though I'm not happy about the overall feeling, like watching these kids that you watch every week get a breakthrough and get a moment that feels like it matters is really great. And so if you beat Clemson, you get that kind of good energy. You get that moment where you're like, you know what? This hasn't been it, but you went out and you did the things you're supposed to, you went out and you did something well, something right. It'll reflect weirdly on the season, but you know what? If everyone goes home happy at the last game, that's a thing you remember. That's a moment where you're like, you know what? My team wasn't good, but we handed those, scum suckers on the other side of the state an L and made them feel bad. And that is a moment. When I look at the matchup overall, I've actually just handed in my breakdown. So I've done most of my scouting on Clemson. And this is a weird Clemson team because they're quote unquote talented, but it's really like, it's not usually with Clemson. You're like, there's a depth of talent and there's some really good top line guys. And with this team, there are some good and occasionally really good, but not consistently really good top line guys. And the depth is just fine. Like they've got 2 good receivers. They've got pretty good, maybe not unbelievable running back. They've got Kate Klubnik for everything his ups and downs. Their line is whatever. Their defense, the defensive front is very vaunted, but then you watch it and it's good at times. It's okay at times. Against Louisville, they just have some moments that are very sloppy and very not impactful. Like I was kind of going through and I was trying to find defensive pop plays to put in my article, and I would just go for series after series, and there just wasn't a lot in the way of tackles for loss. There wasn't a lot in the way of like, oh man, that defensive lineman just picked someone up, threw him out of the way, and smashed something. Like, and this is not the nicest thing to say, but usually with a Clemson defensive line, you expect to see them treat offensive linemen like South Carolina's offensive linemen are treated somewhat often. And there just aren't a lot of those plays. So when I start with this, I think we've even talked about this. A lot of the time you come into a game and you say, what does South Carolina need to do to win? And the answer is, can you play a competent to slightly above average South Carolina game? You should be you should be at least in toss-up, make plays at the end, that kind of game. And if you can play a good South Carolina game, you should have a reasonable chance of winning this. Now, has this team always delivered a good South Carolina game? No. Have they delivered a lot of ho-hum meh South Carolina games? Yes, definitely. So, if you can come with Texas A&M effort, if you can come with, some of the explosiveness we saw last week, granted, Coastal is its own weird kettle of fish, you can probably win this one. If you show up with LSU effort, yeah, it's going to be a real crap day for most people. But I definitely think this Clemson team is not – this is not a Clemson team where you come in and say they got to ball out or they're in trouble.
I agree. And so here's the thing. So one of the mantras of Shane Beamer's program is to dominate the fourth quarter. And up until this year, they've beaten a lot of ranked teams in November. In fact, I think the Texas A&M game is like the only loss to a highly ranked team in the month of November under Shane Beamer, at least since 2021, when I'm sure Clemson was ranked. But I mean, they led at Missouri. It was a one-score game at LSU. They led against Alabama. It was a one-score game against LSU. They led against Texas A&M. I mean, if you finish the deal in those games, you're sitting here today 9-2. And you would be watching the college football playoff rankings because with all of those wins, Brad Crawford, by the way, good friend from 24/7 Sports, wrote on Saturday, for the first time since September, South Carolina is not playing a team ranked in the top 15, either at the time in which they played them or currently ranked. Obviously, LSU's gone into crapper. Brian Kelly, that always seemed like, I don't know, a dude that thought he was marrying a beautiful woman, and then he found out it was the winner of RuPaul's Drag Queen. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it just was not. It was a very weird. It was just very weird. Like if he would have left Notre Dame to go to Penn State or Ohio State or Michigan or someplace like that, it'd been a lot better fit. But they have played great teams. I was at the Alabama game. They absolutely snatched defeat from the jaws of victory. They've done it multiple times. And so, by all accounts, this should be a close game. If South Carolina is at home, I mean, if they have the lead in the fourth quarter, are they going to have PTSD from this season, or are they going to be able to close the deal because that is a core value and one of the battle cries of this program is to dominate the fourth quarter? I mean, to me, that in and of itself is a conundrum and one of the biggest keys of the game. Can they break the cycle of this season's fourth quarter collapses?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and I think I talked about this idea a little bit after the Texas A&M game, which is people get very into the idea of plays called and probably don't think enough about the idea of plays made, in the sense that like you can draw all sorts of stuff up on a whiteboard, and maybe you'll scheme someone open, but the fact is, people have to go out there and make things happen. Like the two big touchdowns against Texas A&M were perfectly nicely designed plays, but what happened was people with talent went out, executed them really well, and then did stuff with them. You know, like you can design a streak ball to Vendrevious. I can't actually pronounce his name, to Mr. Jacobs.
Vendrevious Jacobs.
Vendrevious Jacobs. You can design streak balls for him all day long, but he has to get those steps, and Lenora Sellers has to put the ball in his breadbasket. And a lot of the time in those fourth quarters, it has felt like people, whether they are receivers, whether they are running backs, whether they are offensive linemen, whether they are Lenora Sellers, not doing enough to make those plays. And that is sort of the key there. Like that's gut check time. I'll never forget. I was talking to our mutual friend Eric Kimry at one of those podcasts, and I was talking about, trying to reveal more of the play calling and trying to feel more of the design and trying to reveal more of the little stuff. And Eric told me, basically he said, a lot of that is overrated. And he said, the stuff that you as sports writers write about people's resolve, people's constitution, all that kind of stuff. That's another thing that matters, and we don't talk about a lot. The idea that, like, you might not be bigger or stronger than Peter Woods on a given play, but that doesn't mean you can't run your double team correctly and move him out of the way and create a lane that turns a 2-yard Rasul Faison run into a 7-yard Rasul Faison run. And that takes you from 2nd and 8 to 2nd and 3. And maybe that means you're in a better position. And yeah, it seems like you can talk about, broader, like maybe a malaise at points with this team where it was maybe getting in its own head a little bit, because I think we've talked about, like, the potential and ability is there for a lot of these players, and they haven't been able to bring it out of themselves, and their coaches haven't been able to bring it out of them. And if it comes down to it, that's football. Does a team show up in the right moment to make the right plays? Last year's team, if they had been 15% worse in several fourth quarters, they would have been, 7-5, 6-6? But they weren't. And that's how the history books get written. And, the history is going to get written about this game. And if it is tight in the fourth quarter, they're going to have to make those plays, or hope Clemson is extremely sloppy and doesn't make them, which also very possible, because this team is some of the defense against that Louisville team was wild bad.
Well, and I thought just Louisville, they snatched defeat from the jaws of victory in that game. All right, so what about the Mike Furry factor? Because South Carolina's offense, 6 of the 8 quarters in which he has run it, has really looked like we kind of thought it would look, with explosive plays, with good run plays. Mike Furry and Sean Elliott, I think, have insisted that the best 2 running backs on the team, Jawarn Howell and Matthew Fuller, get most of the carries. There's still some Rasul Faison, but I think Lenore Sellers, even though he's not playing perfect, because I think he just still has the Mike Shula PTSD of, like, sometimes just not throwing it away. Just basic fundamentals. It's 4th and 16 against Texas A&M. I know Nick Harbor was on the sideline, but brother, you got to throw it up to somebody. You can't run for 6 yards and step out of bounds. But how do you factor in Mike Furry's impact on the offense? Because I do believe the players, they're playing faster, they're playing with more tempo. He's getting the ball out on the perimeter quickly to very talented wide receivers, even though they're very young. And Vandrevis Jacobs, by the way, against Texas A&M, Lenore Sellers dropped a 51-yard seed to that dude. That was impressive. But then there's been the Missouri game where he had Mazeo Bennett on a busted coverage wide open for a walk-in, and he missed him by like 5 or 6 yards.
You can go back to the A&M game. They had a great little design to clear a slant on a 3rd down for Jacobs, and
he just missed it bad. Yeah.
In terms of play calling, I think they're going to a few more things that I think you've seen in the past that Fury likes. It seems like they're doing a few more RPOs, spitting the ball out a little bit better. It's a little hard to tell because that Coastal defense is really one of the worst defenses I've ever laid eyes on. They are so bad in space and so bad in tackling, and it's just you can run whatever. Like, I honestly think, and I know Gamecocks fans will probably disagree with me on this, I think if Mike Shula was calling that game, they're still in the low 40s at minimum, because I think you could.
I think 30 max.
I think you could have run a lot of stuff and that ball would go. That being said, it does feel like just sort of watching, it does feel like the change has has energized people a little bit. You're getting a few more plays out of people. You're getting, in the first half against A&M, there were like some very well blocked like inside zone runs. And that hasn't been a given. It hasn't been perfect. I think Shed Surratt has been a little more up and down than we've probably talked about, but I think I think they've shown a little more verve and a little more life after that change. And that verve and that life gets you playing harder, gets you making more plays. I think sometimes you need a change in voice. And I think that the change in voice has been modestly beneficial. I don't think it's changed the world. I think it's been modestly beneficial. It's been a nice thing. And I think I'm sort of interested to see what it can kind of get out of them in this last game.
All right, so the message board mafia, that's what we call them, because I just have a podcast and a weekly town hall, and we do the YouTube live, no message board, because a lot of those guys really don't know a damn thing about college football. And so now you have all these people jumping up and down on a soapbox or being convinced Mike Furry is going to be the next offensive coordinator at South Carolina. And, let's make the case for Mike Furry. I think there's no case. Even if he scores 50 against Clemson, I just don't think Shane Beamer can make that hire. Maybe he would name him co-offensive coordinator. We're getting ready to get to your list, which, by the way, my list and your list, I call them the killer bees. There's a lot of dudes that are either their last name starts with B or their first name starts with B. And I like a lot of them. I just think, number one, Mike Furry is not a quarterback coach. You need a guy that is going to have the cachet and the track record that Lenore Sellers will say, hey, this guy can get me to where I should be this year, which is maybe on the stage in New York for the Heisman and in the green room at the NFL draft, waiting to be a top 5 or top 10 pick. Shane Beamer also has an athletic director that did not hire him. I think it has to be a quarterback whisperer, developer kind of guy that is going to run a much different offense than South Carolina has run. Air raid, up tempo. There's guys that have Graham Harrell and Lane Kiffin and even Mike Leach background that I think are in this search. And so to me, Mike Furry is needed to be the wide receiver coach to develop Jaden Sellers, Donovan Murph, Lex Cyrus, Malik Clark, Brian Rowe, Saquel Patterson, who's coming in, Jacobs hopefully will be back, Nick Harbor, who, by the way, does not get enough targets on a weekly basis. That's another thing about Mike Shula that just absolutely sucked balls. And they ignored Michael Smith, and he went in the transfer portal. Don't even get me started on that. But if you were an odds maker, what are the odds that it is Mike Furry? I just don't see it.
It feels like a long shot to me. I think I think it's hard to do an internal hire after an internal hire goes super sideways. Now, Shane Beamer, for the many things he is definitely a person who cares less about the appearances than a lot of coaches. He definitely is pretty good saying, I'm going to cut my own path. So that's always a possibility. I think it's a hard sell to your boss. I think it's a hard sell coming off that. And it's a hard sell because also you put yourself in a position where you're saying, I thought I had a good offensive coordinator on my staff, but I actually had a different, better offensive coordinator on my staff, but I didn't give him a chance. Like, the energy is very weird on that front. So, like, I didn't include him on the list that I made, in part because I talked it over with the editor and was like, do we want silly internal candidates or like curveballs? And the answer was, not really. And I didn't really want to do that because I don't. Obviously, it could end up that way, and it wasn't a prediction list, but I'm just a little skeptical it would happen until it actually happens. And it seems like a hard sell. Again, Dow Loggins seemed like a hard sell. So maybe the odds are a hint higher than I think. But ultimately, like, if you're hiring for your job, you want the right guy, but you also would really like to have him fire people up. Now, those people probably are more in the building than outside of it, but I'm also like a little skeptical that Sellers is going to be over the moon with a receivers coach who doesn't work with quarterbacks. And, you don't necessarily want to sign a coach just on the whims of one player, but you can consider it. Probably good to have some fresh perspective. And I think sometimes fans get very attached to their people, and they're like, well, if we don't hire this person, we'll lose them. And it kind of speaks to a lack of perspective that, like, these coaches know a billion other coaches, and Shane Beamer can call a lot of people and say, hey, who's a good wide receivers coach coming up in the P5 level that needs a break? If Fury were to not want to stay, if there wasn't a change. And I think Fury's a very good wide receivers coach, and I think he has a very good energy to him, and you'd hate to lose him, but ultimately, we saw that we had the Brian McClendon experience, and we realized that because you seem like you might be that thing, you might not be that thing. And yeah, I'm not ruling it out, but I don't see a ton of logic in it. And that's no slight to Fury himself, who I think probably is going to be someone's pretty decent play caller before too long. Just maybe not here.
All right, so let's go through some names and maybe in alphabetical order. A lot of them are killer bees, is what I call them, because of that Braves lineup with Sid Bream and Belliard, and I don't know, there were 2 or 3 others. And Carolina's pitching staff, that was probably Ray Tanner's team that got beat by Louisiana Lafayette in Super Regional. They had the killer bees too. And so a name that I'm hearing from a source who used to be in the building with ties to a lot of people that's still in the building is John David Baker. All right, and I'm going to tell you there are multiple reasons why I like John David Baker. One, he has 3 names. He fits the profile. He is a white male between 25 and 45. He could be a serial killer. And honestly, South Carolina needs a killer. I'm being facetious here, but metaphorical. They need a killer play caller. And he has 3 names. That is the part of the FBI requisite for being a serial killer. They all have 3 names. I guess except Ted Bundy, but who's counting? He's 35. He's in his 2nd year at East Carolina. They're breaking records. He was at Southern Cal with Clay Helton and Graham Harrell, air raid background, and he spent 3 years with Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss. 2 of those, he was a co-offensive coordinator. So he's intimately familiar with that offense. To me, all of those things are very appealing. Plus, he was a college quarterback. He's coached quarterbacks. He's in North Carolina. That's the recruiting footprint for South Carolina. I think there's a lot of things to like about John David Baker. And dude, if somebody puts this clip up and it comes across your YouTube feed, I'm not saying you're a serial killer. I'm being facetious, but you do have 3 names and it's kind of funny. And the SEC is full of sharks, which are killers as assistant coaches, as recruiters. It's cutthroat. And that's why I use that reference. I think there's a lot of momentum with that. I'm not saying he is the guy by any stretch of the imagination, because maybe he is the distraction. That's the name they're floating out, and maybe it's Kendall Briles. I don't know. But your thoughts on John David Baker?
I like the name. I like the background between Air Raid and Lane Kiffin stuff seems interesting. Like, I think the big question there is obviously the track record's pretty short, though you do like a guy. This is a strange way to phrase it. He probably can impress in an interview room since he was hired on by Mike Houston, who then got fired, and then Blake Harrell comes in and holds on to him. Is that Blake Harrell? That's his name, right? The ECU coach? Anyway, yeah, Blake Harrell. So you're talking 2 guys two different coaches, one who was desperate and one who is trying to start something. Both saw him and said, this guy's impressed us, with that behind the scenes stuff. And I think some of it is you sort of wonder, only 2 years in the job, and you're basically asking, how much of the stuff that he has learned has he synthesized? What kind of vision does he have? It's interesting this year. They're like weirdly run heavy, or they really run the ball a lot this year, which is not something I would have totally expected. Granted, they're also running like 1,000 plays a game, 77. Good Lord. But, and I think fans will potentially like that here. But in the grand scheme of are you getting a younger coach, wide open offense, high pace, that probably doesn't totally match some of the physicality stuff that Shane Beamer tends to talk about, but he also got, 1,100 yards out of that Burns running back who ended up at ECU, which is pretty good. So I think it would be a perfectly good and logical hire. You do have to probably commit to that kind of offensive lifestyle, which can sometimes be tricky for coaches. Like, you have to just be like, it's okay that we're putting the defense out there a lot. So that would be one to sort of ponder, but he's probably not to my brain, like a top number 1 name, but I think he's one that if you end up with him, you say, yeah, that's pretty good.
All right, so lately Jason Beck's name has been brought up. He was with Bronco Mendenhall at Virginia. I think he was with him at BYU, and then they came to Virginia. He played at BYU. He coached at BYU. I'm pretty sure he's a Mormon. He's at Utah now, where he's doing a great job calling plays. And he was with Robert Anae. Yes. At Virginia and at Syracuse. They had Lenore Sellers committed at both places. Last year, I guess there was some talk about Kyle Whittingham retiring. I just don't know if he does. I think, honestly, that dude is probably the most underrated head football coach in America, Kyle Whittingham, without a doubt. He I think he's top 5 in the country, but not a lot of people would put him on a top 5 list. To me, he's home. I just don't see it unless Whittingham is retiring and there's the allure of finally getting to coach this guy that we were smart enough. Me and Robert and I were way smarter than Marcus Satterfield, which is still a very low bar. That we offered this guy, we had him committed not at one place but 2 places. And I can do a lot of good things. It feels kind of a stretch, though, because he is a Mormon, a Utah guy, and he's home.
So in terms of that, I think the question's going to be like, does he want to take a big shot? Like, does he want to say, what is this? It's not like he hasn't lived out east. Like we said, was at Virginia. So he has some experience here. Obviously, home is home. And maybe that is just what it is. But, coaches on balance are ambitious people. And he might just say, you know what? I'm getting offered a chance to work with a potentially high draft pick in it and an SEC roster. It's going to be an uphill battle. And if it goes sideways, there's plenty of schools probably out in Utah that would snap him up in a heartbeat. Even if they have a decent offense and Shane Beamer gets fired, like Utah would probably bring him back. And
the guy would keep him since he was in his first year.
Very much. And, I actually really like the Bronco Mendenhall style of offense because it's very versatile and it shapeshifts. And they've for a long time were really good at figuring out what they had. Like, they're like kind of a power zone read offense right now. When he was with Anai in Virginia, they had that one team that just sling it all over the yard. They had that team that was the year after they played South Carolina in the bowl game that had a mobile quarterback and was physical as hell. But like, they do a really good job having, to my mind, just an enormous toolkit in terms of, you don't necessarily say a Bronco Mendenhall, Robert Anai style offense is X, other than being like, they're probably kind of mean. And so I'm just sort of intrigued, like, what kind of offense would pop out, because in theory you could have a lot of dynamic stuff. You potentially could have the level of physicality that Shane Beamer likes to talk about, and you also might have a team that slings it around a lot because, those guys went and worked for Dino Babers, a high-paced RPO kind of guy. So he would be very high on my list. And I think the most interesting thing for that would be, what vision would he present for Shane Beamer in an interview? Or has he presented? Maybe they've already talked. And that's the place that I'm interested in. Just like, because it's not necessarily coming in and saying, we run X, then what does he tell Shane Beamer we're going to run?
All right. So, I was a basketball coach for a long time, high level, high school, prep school, college assistant, worked for a Hall of Famer. Basketball coaches in general are way smarter than football coaches. They clearly understand time and score situations and when the clock is actually your opponent and not the other team. But coaching 101 is, you evaluate your players, you figure out what they do best, and you build your system around that. But your system can be versatile enough to where maybe you need to be run heavy because you don't have a great quarterback, or your best 2 wide receivers are on the shelf for injuries. And you have a system that is quarterback friendly, but that fits what your players do. That should always be the case. And Mike Shula did not get that. And neither did Marcus Satterfield. Dow Loggins, it took him a few weeks to figure it out because Lenoris was a freshman. They had a lot of new players, but he did figure it out. And that is the essence of coaching, is putting your players in position to be successful by playing to their skill sets and doing what they can do best. And so with everybody, that should be the case. But clearly it's not. I mean, I'm with you. Jason Beck is 40 years old. I would be over the moon with him because he's played for a hard-nosed, tough, physical, defensive-minded football coach, or he's coached with him in Kyle Whittingham. And he has completely rehabilitated their offense from last year. So he's definitely, to me, an A-list candidate. And so is the next guy, another killer bee, and that is Cade Bell with a K, the son of Kerwin Bell, who played for his dad at Valdosta State. He put up huge numbers. He coached for his dad. Then he went and coached at Tusculum and then someplace else, and now he's in his second year at Pitt. He's 32 years old. He's kind of the boy wonder because he has meshed his dad's system, which was kind of a lot of the same concepts as Steve Spurrier, with Joe Brady 2019 at LSU. And they put up a lot of points. And he's got a quarterback that was very highly recruited along the same timeline as Lenore Sellers and Eli Holstein, who I think went to Alabama or was committed to them, maybe flipped to LSU, maybe it's vice versa. But he's at Pitt, and that dude is balling out. And so are the Pitt Panthers. They took Georgia Tech out of the ACC championship game. And if they can win this weekend, they're going to be in the ACC championship game. What are your thoughts on Cade Bell, and what do you see from that system?
I like what I see. It's definitely a little pass heavy. The most interesting thing to me, and this is probably like kind of a subtle soft skills thing, is the fact that he, as young as he is, has been able to create or to install this offensive vision under Pat Narduzzi is really interesting because, like, Pat Narduzzi is a coach who sees good, fiery offense and is like, let's tamp that down a little bit for the most part. So the idea that he can flourish and build this offense within a Pat Narduzzi thing tells you something about an ability to work with people. And that is very interesting to me from a staff standpoint, from an approach standpoint. Clearly they love slinging it all over the yard. And, you know, a guy who, learning from his dad, a guy who, you know, took a lot of Spurrier principles and ended up at Valdosta State a bunch, like, that's throw heaven for a background. You'd be a little concerned with questions about, you know, what does a run game look like under him? But I mean, I don't think you can go wrong. It's probably that with that run game factor in the SEC, it's probably maybe a little higher variance gamble. Like, if you end up in a tough spot passing and you can't run the ball in the SEC, like, stuff's going to go sideways real fast. But I think it's a pretty worthwhile one. I think, again, it'll take a little more chutzpah to do. But if you end up doing it, I'm real interested.
I like him a lot. All right, so another killer bee, Jonathan Brewer at Duke, doing a great job there. It's from the Gus Malzahn, Rhett Lashley tree. I like what they do. Honestly, and it's Duke. I mean, Kevin Johns too. I mean, nobody's talking about him, but I would have been elated. I still don't understand why Mike Elko did not take Kevin Johns with him to Texas A&M with the job that he did at Duke. Okay, when you can do more with less, that is what you need at South Carolina for every sport, unless you're Dawn Staley. So I like Jonathan Brewer. I like the Rhett Lashley, Gus Malzahn tree because it's tempo. They have run game. They throw it. And they've been very, very successful.
Yeah, the place that I'm going to be the most interested in, if he were to get hired, is what kind of that run game sort of looks like, because it's been a little bit funky in terms of last year's roster did not have much in the way of a quarterback. That was sort of odd. This year they go out and get Darian Mensah, who I think was good, but maybe isn't like great. And they've got a lot of production out of him, maybe more production than necessarily like as good as he's looked. I actually ended up going to a Duke game this year against Georgia Tech, which was interesting. But they've definitely got a lot out of Mensah. They got a lot out of that receiver Barkate. Run game was a little weaker than you'd like, but that strikes me as perhaps a personnel question, especially like you're leaning into what you're good at because you're at Duke. But yeah, I mean, you're coming from the Lashley, Malzahn world where, you know, those offenses can go pretty pass heavy. Those offenses can go pretty run heavy. And I'm intrigued. I don't know that I'd have him like your top 2 or 3 kind of candidates, but I put him sort of in that space where if you get him, you should feel pretty good about it.
I agree. So I'm going to ask people to bear with me. I'm going to mute after my question because the yard guy's out there blowing in the front because we're doing the show later than we normally do it to accommodate Ben, so he didn't have to get up before the sun came up in beautiful Berkeley. So a guy that's not on your list, but a guy to me that is worth visiting because of the situation at TCU and the fact that there's a relationship with Jeremiah Donati is Kendall Briles. And that offense, they build around their personnel.
It's going to blow people away like blown out of your...
Just tell me about Kendall Briles and maybe this guy will be gone.
I mean, obviously Kendall Briles comes from his dad's tree, has bounced around a lot. He probably has one of the most unusual tenures of any coach in his time at Arkansas because they were running. I talked to someone who basically said the bones of what Arkansas was running when they were that big power team with Rocket and that big old quarterback whose name is escaping me. They ran the same. The bones of that scheme are the same as the bones of the Tennessee scheme, but it's adapting to personnel. So you really like that fact. I think it's always going to be it's always going to be a funky sell because on the one hand, he is a Briles and you have all that nonsense behind it. On the other hand, he's been around and he's run a fair number of good offenses. I think this year's TCU offense is maybe a little less bombastically successful than you would like. The consistency has been sort of an issue. Yeah, they're under 30 points a game now, which would give me a little pause.
Their quarterback absolutely sucks at TCU.
This seems quite probable. And then, that can open up interesting questions in itself. The space that I don't know is, I don't know where he's considered and I don't know what he's looking at because if Sonny Dykes doesn't push him out, does he feel like he's in the catbird seat? Does he want to come to try to take on this challenge? Because I had been for a while putting him in what I would call the Buster Faulkner zone, which is he going to try to jump for a smaller head coaching job, or is he going to wait it out and hope that someone who can say, I'll give you 44 and 5 stars to work with, is that school going to call him? Because, if I'm an offensive coordinator and I have a position to take over a Georgia, an Oregon, a Penn State, like, no offense to South Carolina, but if someone says you get all these tools, or they say you can come to South Carolina where you have some pretty good tools, but not all of them, and you're coaching for someone else's job, that to me has long felt like a tricky sell. And so that's the place where I kind of put that. Like, if you can get Kendall Briles, if he says yes, you probably have to do it. You'll live with some of the, you'll live with some PR stuff to work through. It's football, that's life. My question there isn't a matter of pursuit, it's a matter of proper perspective on ability to get him. And, you give it the college try, you see where Jeremiah is with him, and if there's interest, you go from there. It's like, I'm sure when South Carolina signed Steve Spurrier, there were a lot of people that were like, wait, really? So you try, but you also understand that he is probably in an advantageous enough position that he's not necessarily going to jump. Also, TCU, if I understand correctly, ain't lacking for cash. So the question is, what can the opportunity be stolen for? And the relationships.
All right, so I agree. But I agree for a guy like Kendall Briles and Buster Faulkner, who fits in the Killer Bee because his name's Buster. I strongly advocated last year, before you hired Mike Shula, to try to get Buster Faulkner. Now, on Gamecock Central, Shane Beamer has high interest in hiring Buster Faulkner. All right, so earmuffs for all the small children. No shit. Okay, why wouldn't you have wanted to hire Buster Faulkner, and why were you stupid enough not to hire Buster Faulkner last year?
I'm kind of surprised that information got out there, because frankly, like, if I was Shane Beamer, like, listen, I want all sorts of stuff out in the universe. I want the truth out there. I want this. But, like, a lot of the coaching reporting is sort of, PR is not the right word, but a lot of it is like getting names out there, generating buzz, all that. And I'll tell you what, if I was South Carolina, I wouldn't want my name to be associated with that, because it then turns to sounding like you're taking a swing at someone you're not going to get, probably. And so that's wild that that's even out there. But yeah, no, like, last year was the time to try to take a swing at Buster Faulkner. And even then, Buster Faulkner might have said, sort of pull a Tom Herman and say, I'll come back for another year, see how it goes. The last year, obviously, you're hiring with rope, whereas this year you're not hiring with any rope. So, yeah, it's nice. It's nice to make a call. It's nice to go up to the prettiest girl at the bar and offer to buy her a drink. But, a lot of people are trying to buy her drinks, and you might not have the best car outside. You might not have the nice fancy Lamborghini. So,
Lenore Sellers is a Lamborghini.
Good to make a call. Yes, but in the current shape, probably a trip to the shop for a lot of things overall. Not Lenore specifically, but just the overall program, job, etc.
I mean, I agree. He's got to be deprogrammed. He's got to have the diagnostics. He needs a guy that can rehabilitate him, give him his confidence back, help him play with freedom, with the wild abandon. I think Furry has started that process. But I mean, that's the thing. And here's the thing that Shane Beamer has not allowed. Like this year, some of these guys are going to have him bent over a barrel. Like Kendall Briles is at a minimum going to say, I'm bringing my offensive line coach and I'm replacing this moron that you hired to be your running backs coach that's yet to sign anybody out of high school. And I'm bringing Jimmy Smith because those guys know my system. And Beamer may not go for that because he's pretty arrogant and he's pretty hard-headed. And that's why, to me, those are the reasons why it won't be Kendall Briles, even though, honestly, nobody's mentioning Kendall Briles' name, which I think is a good thing if he would consider that deal. All right, so the last guy I'm going to ask you about is not going to be Brad Glenn, who is a killer bee, who's always worked for an Appalachian State guy everywhere he's been. Satterfield, Mark Spear, Sean Elliott, now back with Satterfield. But not a killer bee. And I don't think a guy that's on your list, but a guy that I mentioned first. And then my guy, J.C. Sherbert, talked about him, which tends to make me think he is involved. And that is Seth Dagey, who was a prolific quarterback for Mike Shula at Texas Tech. I'm pretty sure he's the guy that hit Michael Crabtree with that winning touchdown pass in the biggest game ever played at Lubbock. Maybe it was Graham Harrell. I can't remember. But he is at Arizona. They are putting up a lot of points. He is an air raid guy. He is a younger guy. He'll be 38 next month. He's also been with Graham Harrell and Clay Helton and Lane Kiffin. And he has clearly ran his own offense at Marshall. And now he's running it with great success at Arizona. And to me, he's a very intriguing guy. I watched them against Baylor. And, their head coach is a great defensive coordinator, and he just had no clue on how to stop them. What are your thoughts on Seth Dagey? I mean, he played the position at a high level. He's coached them up everywhere he's been, and he's put up big points. And he's worked for guys that have air raid concepts, and then Lane Kiffin, not air raid. I mean, some air raid, but a very diverse offensive system is what I'm trying to say.
I would say that I'm intrigued and still trying to kind of get sort of a feel for it. The resume is you like the influences, recognizable name, seems like people respect and like him. For a lot of these guys, the resume is a bit short, and this is one where I'm still trying to kind of piece together how I feel about it. Like, there is some diversity. Last year's Marshall team clearly was a little bit more of kind of your quarterback run game zone read team. And they managed to get kind of not super high volume production, but pretty efficient production out of a zone read quarterback. This year, he goes to Arizona. He's got a quarterback who I believe is 1,000 years old. I'm pretty sure I feel like Noah Fifita may have been playing when I was still a full-time sports writer. That's not true, but it feels that way. So
is he older than Oscar Attaway or Rasul Faison, though? Or Diego Pavia?
not Faison, but it feels like he's inherited this very seasoned quarterback, and a part of me is like, okay, how do you separate a very seasoned quarterback from that kind of pass heavy offense this year? But I also think Brett Brennan's a hell of a coach, and am impressed with that turnaround. Frankly, when Arizona hired Brett Brennan after Jed Fish, I was like, I think Arizona upgraded. That might be just because I'm a Jed Fish hater. Who's to say? But I feel like it's a bit of an upside play. It's a bit of a we haven't seen a ton, but we like enough of what we've seen to say we think this will work. And in some ways, that feels like a very Shane Beamer kind of move, because he does tend to say the resume might not be this way, but we believe in X, Y, and Z. That may make a bunch of your listeners cringe the way I said that, but I'm intrigued. I think he would be a solid get. Maybe I'm a little lower on him than some, but that isn't to say like I'm like this is a bad idea. It's more like I'm less sure at this moment about it. But, you know, if you hired him now, it would have at least as much juice as any other Shane Beamer offensive coordinator hire. And maybe that's faint praise, because honestly, and this is a thing that, you might just drop me off the feed right now, I think the Mike Shula hire had the most juice of the three, and I don't know what that says about it.
But he is also 61 and going through a divorce, and
still
there are some
juice.
accounts that there was a lot of anxiety and breaking out in sweats before games, and
Actually,
I think he also had the personality of a cardboard box.
That reminds me of I was having a conversation, this was years ago, with a source who had been in a different building and was working with an offensive coordinator who had done some good stuff and then got hired to be sort of a part of an offensive brain trust, and it was going very badly. And he said that he had talked to someone who just walked by this man's office and saw this man, who's ended up being like not really successful, but like semi-successful since, and just was like, that man was just sitting in his office staring at his laptop with a face that said, oh God, what have I wandered into here? And when I read some of the reports about Shula, my brain kind of, and I don't know, I haven't talked to anyone who saw that, but my brain kind of jumped to that moment of like, sometimes a person finds themselves in a position and they thought it would go one way and people thought it would go one way and it just hasn't. And those are the risks in this profession. Nothing is guaranteed. People are still people. And sometimes something looks okay on paper and the soft skills don't work. And I think that's going to be an interesting part of this hire is going to be Shane Beamer seems like a guy who believes he can read some of those soft skills. And in addition to whatever a resume says, can he do that to the level that, gets this thing to go right?
Yeah, I don't know. So last night, good friend Jordan Kay, one of your predecessors, is it predecessors? At Go Gamecocks in the state, Jeremiah Donati officially said Shane Beamer would be back next year as the head coach of the Gamecocks. Why do you think you would? I mean, I have theories. I want yours first. Why do you think they make that announcement on the Tuesday before the Clemson game? And I bet we're going to have a lot of the same theories, but I want yours first.
I mean, I think there were a lot of rumblings that maybe Shane is coaching for his job, maybe this and that. And I think I don't think those rumblings feed a certain kind of part of the fan base. And I think they don't feed a lot of the other fan base. I think they create sort of they create some instability, they create questions. You're fielding conversation with players. Players are going to tell their agents to look around more. I think you want to try to head that off of the pass, and especially because if you don't do anything about it and then you don't fire him anyway, then you've had all this instability, and all the people who want to fire him are even more angry. So you might as well just rip that Band-Aid off right off the bat. And I remember watching the Will Muschamp experience, and I am firmly of the belief that most ADs who are at their most competent will give the pitch and they will say, we're going to do the thing. And then you get to the end of the season or the moment that it actually becomes nut cutting time and you figure it out. Like, everyone has a vote of confidence up until you fire someone. You don't
That's right.
You don't need 3 weeks of talking about it. Like, when a lot of people had a lot of bad stuff to say about Ray Tanner, but when it came to the actual ending of the Muschamp era, it seemed fine. It seemed fine. They took one bad loss. People were mad. They took a second bad loss. All of a sudden, it was like, is it going to happen this week? They took a third bad loss. It happened that week. This is efficient. This is the way you want to do it. You don't need to be Florida with like your underwear hanging out off of the antenna of your car as you're driving down the road all season. Like, you act like it's gonna be the thing until the moment it's not. I'll always remember working with coaches. Coaches are like, this is my team, and the second they take another job, then there's a split. But up until that moment that the job's taken, this is my team, these are my guys, this is the way it works. And I think you set a good precedent not feeding that instability. And you know what? If they lose 58-0 and the money comes in and says, you need to get him out of there, no one is going to be like, but you gave your word last week. Like, you'll just do it. There's no rule against it. And it's good PR and it's good politics. And especially if you want to bring him back already, which is a perfectly fine decision in my opinion. Like, I think if you did want to fire him, I would not say that's out of bounds. But if you don't, then you don't. You don't do it.
I agree. Because if they lose like 49-0 or 58-0 or 45-13, there could be a different result on Sunday. And honestly, I'd be going to Arizona. I'd just send the big plane out there and say, just bring virtually everybody. I mean, although I would say, hey, I'm going to give you $2.5 million a year to go hire Blake Baker or DJ Durkin if he doesn't get the Auburn job or somebody like that. And we'd really like for you to keep, unless Clayton White and all of those guys want to stay, then we'd really like for you to keep them. And we'd like for you to keep Mike Furry, and we need to find a place to keep Sean Elliott. But to me, it came down to three things, okay? You're trying to flip three guys right now. Carson Baker, who was the number one running back South Carolina had for this recruiting class for 2 years. He was going to visit June 20th. He committed to Florida the week before that. He shut it down. He's coming to Columbia. National Signing Day is December the 3rd. Landon Duckworth, Darius Gray, Jazavian Currents, Zion Giles, Saquel Patterson. They've got a lot of highly touted guys they're still trying to flip. 5-star defensive end Zion Ely and Julian Walker, whose dad is a former Wisconsin, I think, player and strength coach or assistant strength coach at Wisconsin, and who I think could be the next head strength coach at South Carolina. I could see that being one of the tweaks Shane Beamer makes, to have a new voice going into year 6. And you'd really like to get all of those guys. Plus, you're trying to hire an offensive coordinator, and you've got to hire a tight ends coach, and I think a running backs coach, because even though Marquell Blackwell is light years ahead of Montario Hardesty, I would say the only running backs coach in the history of South Carolina worse than Montario Hardesty was Madre Hill. So I think in addition to the OC hire, you got to hire a running backs coach and a tight ends coach, and some guys are going to want to bring their O-line coach, I think, and for player retention. So to me, recruiting, keeping the recruiting class together, trying to flip some guys that they know Shane Beamer's going to be there unequivocally now. For the guys that you're trying to hire as offensive coordinator, they're not waiting around saying, well, shit, dude, I don't even know if you're going to be here after Sunday. Why should I take this job? And then, player retention, because guys are going to start going into the portal immediately after the game, even though the portal doesn't open until January. And so, to me, those are the reasons why. And like you said, just to quell the negative recruiting, the naysayers, and all of that. And having said all that, I think South Carolina should beat Clemson. I mean, they played 5 of the top 6 teams in the SEC. The only one they haven't played is Texas. And other than Oklahoma and Vanderbilt, because Lenora Sellers got injured, they battled every one of them into the 4th quarter. And there's a lot of really good players on this roster. And I do think the culture and the brotherhood that Shane Beamer talks about was on full display after a crushing, demoralizing defeat against Texas A&M. They bounced back, albeit against not really a good team. They showed up. They didn't just go through the motions. They flew around in all 3 phases, and I think they're going to do the same this weekend.
I'm feeling positive toward South Carolina's chances of winning. It feels like it might end up being like a 4th quarter game, but maybe one where they're in a little bit of a better position than they've been of late. And I don't know that I trust Clemson to really steal it. I could see them doing it, but it's definitely one that my read keeps coming back to. South Carolina can win this. The question is, are they going to go do it? And I am excited for 9 p.m. California time, or noon back east, posting up with a couple of laptops and probably some early morning caffeine, and seeing what this team can do.
And I mean, great games on Friday too. I mean, you don't have to wait until Saturday. Like you get,
we got Navy Memphis on Thanksgiving. Bring on the triple option to make Ryan Silverfield possibly feel bad. Actually, can I freelance for half a second? I have a small thing I need to get off my chest.
Absolutely.
This is not related to the University of South Carolina as it goes to coaching openings, since, as we said, Shane Beamer is where he is. But right now, reports are starting to trickle out. I don't know if they're true yet, but that Arkansas is going to hire Alex Golish. And if that is the case...
That's a great hire.
If that is the case, I am very impressed at a number of second-tier jobs that are landing candidates a tier ahead of them. The 3 I'm thinking of: North Texas coach going to Oklahoma State, Jim Mora, who I think is a fine coach, is going to Colorado State for reasons I don't understand. And this potentially, if it does happen, Alex Golesh to Arkansas. These are three coaches that if you had told me they landed at better jobs, I would have said that makes sense. And instead, we have this. And I am, hopefully someone does some reporting on it, because I am fascinated. We have all these big jobs open, not nearly enough big job candidates, and whoever those places hire, the places they hire from are then going to have to hire someone. Like, there's only one Lane Kiffin, there's only one John Summerall. Florida's going to have to hire someone. Alex Golesh or the North Texas coach. They might end up with Jed Fish. I don't. This carousel is about to get very weird, and I'm excited for it, but I also don't get it.
Do you have a couple minutes to just talk about that? Because I want to piggyback off your piggyback.
Sure. Yeah.
Like, I think if Alex Golesh and Eric Morris should fire their agents because they have really good gigs where they are, and they could get much better jobs a year from now, or maybe even now, because, everybody, a lot of people are thinking Lane Kiffin's going to LSU. Okay, I could see that. It's a top 5 job, and it's not like at Florida where you've only had 2 guys in the history of that program actually win big there, Steve Spurrier and Urban Meyer. I mean, you don't have to be – Ed Orgeron and Les Miles won national championships at LSU, not just Nick Saban. Okay, and Les Miles, his hat was clearly about 3 sizes too tight because it cut off the blood flow to his brain. He would totally mismanage end of games, and somehow they would still win because they just had players. And Ed Orgeron, jambalaya. I mean, come on, dude. Not a great coach. I think Eli Drinkowitz is the guy at Florida. I've heard that's the guy Steve Spurrier wants. That's the one guy I would be scared to death of going to Florida because South Carolina's going to have to play them every year. John Summerall, I think he should get the Auburn job. There's thoughts that maybe he wants Ole Miss more than Auburn. If I was him, I would agree because, again, earmuffs. Auburn's just a batshit crazy job that's kind of like the people that run it are all your crazy uncles and mobsters because they've had 4 coaches in the last 7 years. It's not a stable job. You go 8-3 there, and then you lose to Alabama a couple times, you're getting fired. I mean, Oklahoma State is the outcast job. Okay, it is literally the island that Tom Hanks was stranded on in Castaway. The T. Boone Pickens money is not coming back. Eric Morris could be the group of 5 representative, even still this year in the college football playoff, or he could get the TCU job, or if Rhett Lashley leaves SMU, maybe somebody, even though he signed that contract extension, makes him a huge offer. Or maybe what happens is Lane Kiffin waits and then Kalen DeBoer goes to the either Penn State or to the National Football League to coach Michael Penix with the Falcons, and he goes to Alabama. Or maybe Steve Sarkisian says, dude, Arch Manning, I hitched my horse to the wrong wagon. I'm going to the NFL. I'm going to coach the Falcons or the Giants or whoever. Then maybe Lane Kiffin goes to Texas. Then it's just more chaos and much better jobs than Oklahoma State or Arkansas for Eric Morris and Alex Golesh, who honestly, I'd take either one of those dudes over Shane Beamer. I think they are real head football coaches. To me, you watch Nick Saban when Lane Kiffin was his offensive coordinator. When he was not happy with what Lane Kiffin was doing, he didn't wait to do it behind closed doors. He chewed his ass out on the sideline. Shane Beamer stood idly by like he was reading a John Grisham novel on the sidelines while Mike Shula continued to do the same stupid stuff week after week, series after series, and didn't do anything until it was too late. I just think those guys could have waited and gotten much better jobs.
I tend to agree, but, maybe there's something I don't know, and maybe it just means that a bunch of big name jobs will get a bunch of coaches that have less juice, and maybe that'll be interesting in its own way.
I mean, Josh Pate did say last night there was another guy that was reporting that there was a big name candidate that has a lot of traction at Penn State. That candidate was not named. I'm sure it's not Bob Chesney because I think everybody feels like he could be the guy. But what if it's Kalen DeBoer?
I did just see On3 rounded up a bunch of predictions about where Lane Kiffin was going to end up, and one of my favorite writers, Stephen Godfrey, who's a bit of a shit stirrer, he suggested that Lane would end up at Alabama. And
I think that's the job he really covets.
And that made me laugh a little bit.
I mean, I think he would get that job now. I think Nick Saban would fully support him because he's grown up. I used to think Lane Kiffin's a guy that's going to be day-to-day his entire career, just like Victor Hampton was when he was playing quarterback in South Carolina. But he's grown up. He's valued his family. He hadn't had a drink in 5 years. He looks like $1 million now. He's in great health. He's in a great space, and he's the envy of the college football world because he can basically pick where he wants to go and make more money than anybody else. And all these people throwing hate at him. If you were in his shoes, whether you were a surgeon or a tech bro or a CEO at a Fortune 500 company who had brought in record profits, or a neurosurgeon or an astrophysicist, or name a profession, if all these people were recognizing that you were the best at what you do and they want you for their job and they're willing to pay you more than anybody else in that line or in that profession, I mean, that's a pretty damn good place to be in.
Indeed it is.
All right, well, that is the last word, my friend. Happy Thanksgiving. I can't thank you for being so gracious with your time.
Absolutely.
And a great conversation, wide-ranging. And I did have Kevin Decker on my list, even though I didn't talk about him. And I know you had a guy other than Ryan Silverfield that is at a G5. We did mention Dean Kennedy, but there's one guy, Tim Cramsey at Memphis. To me, he's kind of the off-the-wall, left field, under the radar guy.
Yeah, he's an interesting one. Interesting background, kind of memory serve, bounce around a little bit, but yeah, I'm definitely interested. And I think most of the names on there, I think I've told some people the Decker thing would concern me because he hasn't quickly jump-started an offense. And obviously that is not a situation this fan base can abide by. in any way, shape, or form. But yeah, I think those are two other interesting names, and I think it'll be interesting also to see, like, there's a bunch of openings, so there could be a lot of movement in the space overall, and you know, it'll be interesting to see where people land. Like, shoot, Andy Kotelnicki's got to end up somewhere. I don't know if it'd be in Columbia, but there's folks out
So
there.
here's my thought on Decker.
Hmm.
I think he would be the guy that you could get to leave Old Dominion to come and coach quarterbacks and be the co-coordinator if you were just convinced you wanted Mike Furry to run your offense.
Could be a chance, but
I can't see him being the dude,
no.
though. He's not a big Lebowski hire for sure, which means he's probably the quintessential Shane Beamer hire. Ben, happy Thanksgiving, man. I love you. I appreciate your friendship so much, and I hope I get to run into you in person sometime soon, and we can raise a glass together.
Got to make that happen. Now, go get you some mac and cheese. Go get some.
Oh, it's happening. It's happening. Be well, my friend.
You too.
Enjoy your family. All right, that was the great, the one, the only, Ben Breiner. And so happy Thanksgiving to all of you, my Gamecock family, my extended family. Man, we had about a 2-hour Garnet and Black town hall last night. I'm going to give you the same pitch as Josh Payton. I'm not approaching 500,000 followers because he is Mr. College Football, but hit the subscribe on the YouTube channel. Feel free to join our growing Gamecock family from Patreon, patreon.com. So best of luck to all of you, and we'd love to have you join our Gamecock family, the Garnet and Black Town Hall, the Sunday morning after podcasts, and every day, Monday through Friday. So it's easy to find. Patreon.com/Gamecock Pod Daily, all lowercase. You can follow me on Twitter at KAllsep. You can follow the podcast at Gamecock Pod. There's links there. If all else fails, just type it in on the Googler and it'll take you right there. So until next week, happy Thanksgiving. A lot of great college football, a lot of time to enjoy family if your parents are still around. As somebody whose parents have not been around for a long time, even if they're cantankerous and kick you off sometimes, drink it in, soak up the moments, and enjoy your family, because someday you're going to be just like me, wishing you could put your legs under that family table for just one more meal, surrounded by all the people that you grew up loving the most and that loved you the most. So enjoy your family and friends. There's a lot to be thankful for, and hopefully the Gamecocks do it to the Tigers on Saturday. I will have a rapid reaction podcast on Sunday, and I may do it Saturday afternoon, and there will be some Corona premieres going to my lips while I'm doing it live on YouTube. So sign up just for that, because that'll be a lot of fun. So until next time, Keith Allsep saying happy Thanksgiving. God bless. Go Gamecocks. I am out of here.